In the heart of a Wyoming winter, where the wind howled like a grieving spirit across the endless plains, a young Cheyenne woman named Tala stumbled through the snow, her body racked with pain and her heart heavy with fear. Pregnant and abandoned by her band for reasons she could barely comprehend, whispers of shame, of tradition, of survival, she clutched her swollen belly, each step a defiance against the wilderness that threatened to swallow her whole. Her moccasins, worn thin, sank into the drifts, and her breath clouded in the freezing air. Alone, with no shelter but the skeletal branches of cottonwood trees, she collapsed against a rock, labor pains seizing her like a storm. This was no place for a child to be born, yet here she was, fighting to bring life into a world that seemed to have turned its back on her. Tala, barely 20, had grown up on the edges of her tribe, her spirit too wild for the rigid expectations of her people. Her lover, a young warrior, had promised her a future, but when her pregnancy became known, he vanished into the vastness of the plains, and the elders deemed her a burden. Cast out with nothing but a tattered blanket and a small knife, she wandered for days, her strength waning. Now, as contractions gripped her, she whispered prayers to the spirits, begging for mercy, for her child to live, even if she did not. The cold bit at her fingers, and her vision blurred, but she refused to surrender. She was Cheyenne, descended from warriors, and she would fight until her last breath. Miles away, trudging through the same unforgiving snow, was Elias Hart, a widower whose life had crumbled like dry earth. At 35, he was a man hollowed out by loss. 2 years prior, a fever had stolen his wife, Sarah, and their infant son, leaving him with a small cabin and a heart too heavy to carry. He'd taken to wandering the plains, trading furs and supplies with settlers and tribes, anything to keep moving, to outrun the grief that clung to him like a shadow. His broad shoulders were stooped, his gray eyes dulled, but his hands were steady, calloused from years of toil. That day, he was headed home from a trading post, his pack heavy with goods, when he heard a faint cry on the wind, a sound so desperate it pierced his numbness. Elias followed the sound, his boots crunching through the snow, until he found Tala slumped against the rock, her face pale and her lips blue. She was shivering, her hands cradling her belly as she groaned through another contraction. For a moment, Elias froze, memories of Sarah's labor flooding back, the joy, the fear, the loss. But something in Tala's eyes, a fierce will to survive, snapped him out of his stupor. He dropped to his knees beside her, his voice low and steady. "I'm here," he said. "You're not alone." Tala, barely conscious, could only nod, her trust born of desperation. The first challenge was immediate. Tala needed warmth and shelter, or neither she nor her child would survive the night. Elias worked quickly, his hands trembling not from cold but from the weight of responsibility. He built a makeshift shelter with branches and his own blanket, then started a fire with the flint he always carried. The flames flickered weakly against the wind, but they were enough to keep the worst of the cold at bay. Tala's labor was progressing fast, too fast, and Elias had no experience beyond the memory of his wife's ordeal. He spoke to Tala softly, urging her to breathe, to push, his voice a lifeline in the chaos. She clung to his words, her pain mingling with gratitude for this stranger who had chosen to stay. The birth was grueling. Tala was weak from days without food, and the cold sapped what little strength she had left. Elias tore strips from his own shirt to wrap the newborn when it came, praying it would be enough. After hours of struggle, Tala gave a final, anguished cry, and a tiny, squalling girl entered the world. Elias caught the child, his hands shaking as he cleared her mouth and wrapped her tightly against the cold. Tala, exhausted but alive, reached for her daughter, tears streaming down her face as she whispered, "Naihu," meaning my heart in Cheyenne. Elias felt his own heart crack open, a mix of awe and sorrow for the life he'd helped save and the lives he'd lost, but their ordeal was far from over. The second challenge was survival in the wilderness. The storm showed no signs of relenting, and Tala was too weak to move. Elias knew they couldn't stay exposed, but his cabin was miles away, and carrying a newborn and a frail woman through the snow was a daunting task. He fashioned a sling from his pack to carry the baby, whom Tala named Aoi, meaning life. Supporting Tala with one arm, he began the slow trek to his cabin, stopping frequently to check on Aoi and to stoke Tala's fading strength with sips of water and words of encouragement. Every step was a battle against the wind and his own exhaustion, but Elias refused to let them die. He thought of Sarah, of how she'd always believed in second chances, and he pushed forward, determined to honor her memory by saving these two souls. The journey took hours, each one stretching into eternity. Tala's strength waned, and Elias feared she might slip away, but her love for Aoi kept her fighting. When they finally reached the cabin, it was little more than a single room with a stone hearth, but it was warm and dry. Elias laid Tala on his bed, wrapping her and Aoi in every blanket he owned. He boiled water and used what little supplies he had to make a thin broth, feeding it to Tala spoonful by spoonful. Over the next few days, he tended to them both, his grief giving way to purpose. Tala, the weak, began to recover, her spirit bolstered by Aoi's tiny cries and Elias's quiet kindness. The third challenge was deeper, more complex: trust. Tala, betrayed by her people, struggled to believe in Elias's intentions. She'd seen settlers exploit her kind, and though Elias had saved her, she feared he might expect something in return, or worse, try to take Aoi. Elias, meanwhile, grappled with his own doubts. He'd shut himself off from the world after Sarah's death, and letting Tala and Aoi into his life meant risking more pain. Yet as days turned to weeks, a fragile bond formed. Tala shared stories of her people, of the stars and the spirits, while Elias taught her how to mend traps and tend the fire. Aoi, with her wide, curious eyes, became their bridge, her presence softening the edges of their wounds. The final challenge came when spring arrived, and with it, rumors of Tala's band nearby. She faced a choice. Return to her people, risking rejection again, or stay with Elias, a man whose world was so different from her own. Fear knotted her: fear of being shunned, fear of losing Aoi to a life she couldn't control. Elias, too, wrestled with his heart. He'd grown to love Aoi's laughter and Tala's quiet strength, but he feared holding them back from their heritage. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Tala spoke of her fear, her voice trembling. Elias listened, then said, "You're not alone anymore. Whatever you choose, I'll stand by you." His words, simple but earnest, gave Tala the courage to face her band. She returned to them, Elias at her side, carrying Aoi. The elders were wary, but Tala's resilience and Aoi's existence softened their hearts. They welcomed her back, not as a burden, but as a mother who'd fought for her child. Elias, though an outsider, earned their respect for his role in their survival. Tala chose to stay with her people, but she and Elias remained bound by a deep, unspoken love, not romantic, but rooted in shared struggle and mutual salvation. Elias visited often, bringing supplies and stories, and Aoi grew up knowing both her Cheyenne roots and the man who'd given her a chance at life. Years later, as Elias grew gray and Aoi became a strong young woman, Tala told her daughter their story under a starlit sky. "We were lost," she said, "but the spirits sent a broken man to mend us, just as we mended him." The tale spread among the Cheyenne and settlers alike, a testament to the power of compassion across divides. For the American audience watching this story unfold on a YouTube screen, its message resonates. In the wilderness of loss and hardship, a single act of kindness can spark a chain of hope, binding hearts across cultures and healing wounds that seem too deep to mend. Tala, Elias, and Aoi's story reminds us that even in our darkest moments, we are never truly alone, and together, we can find the strength to rebuild.